Alrighty, folks. I wanted to do, like I said in my last little, uh, video, I wanted to touch bases with you and go over a few subjects. I'm going to try to do this for the remainder of this semester, try to give you a little more. I know it's an online class, but I do like the interaction, and I wanted to give you some background and a little bit of my knowledge on these particular subjects that we're going to be covering as we go along. This week, we're actually talking about engines, and probably one of the funnest things to do is I've had the pleasure of working with some shops in the intimate world, and I would rebuild engines from the ground up. It's not very common anymore unless you get into performance shops or if you just want to rebuild the engine yourself. That becomes a little different. Whereas the way I'm going to, yeah, there it is on. The way today's is we do what we call crate motors. And if you get a customer that brings in a car and you'll buy a motor off the shelf and it comes in a crate, and then you kind of swap out the motor. That's good and great in production type world. But if you want to keep things original, say you've got a classic vehicle, you want to rebuild it yourself. And I wanted to, we're not going to go through a full rebuilding class, but I wanted to kind of point out some of the parts and that are in the engine, so you get a general idea what's going on under the hood. I did hear an actual news broadcast earlier today that Governor Newsom, by 2035, he wants no more gas and diesel or any kind of internal combustion engines to be in the, well, I should say, no, you can't, you won't be able to buy it after 2035. Now, if that works out, we'll see what happens, because there's a lot of people that still believe in gasoline burning, diesel burning, alternate fuels and stuff like that, which we're going to be getting into that subjects as we go along with this class also. Anyways, I wanted to talk a little bit about gasoline engines to start up with. And when we talk about gasoline engines, I'm going to go ahead and share, if I get my cursor over here, there it is. I wanted to share a actual screen with you first as we go across. Now, you should be seeing about now, hopefully, a screen we're going to be talking about. And let me go ahead and start this guy. You should be seeing a screen about now, and hopefully, let me go ahead and stop it and make sure I'm on the right screen. And I should be right about, yeah, there we go. All right, so what we're talking about right now is actually gasoline, engines. And again, this is a introductory class. So I wanted to just kind of give you an overview of what an engine is. Now, some of you are going to be going into management, so you're not going to be going and rebuilding it, but some of you might be going into the field where you're in the mechanical repair side, and you will be actually diagnosing drivability and engine problems like this too. So let's go ahead and get started in here. And one of the things I do want to point out is this is pretty much I would say the guts of the engine itself. Not, you have an engine block that this is all going to be mounted up. We'll get into the engine block in just a few minutes here, but you're looking at the pistons. So these nice aluminum shiny things are called pistons, and that's part of the engine. This is going to go down in a cylinder, almost like a, I don't want to say a sleeve, but an actual cylinder that these pistons go up and down with, and we'll explain the process as we go along. But just in general, here's a piston, and on what you can't see very, very well, but you do see a little bit. My cursor is getting a little funny right now. Probably too much of a load on this system right now. But right here, I have an actual, let it get a few seconds to calm down a little bit here. Anyways, right underneath that piston is actually almost looks like an arm going down. That arm itself is the actual piston rod. It's going to connect to that big ugly thing right in the center here, right here. This is an actual crankshaft. This crankshaft is part of the engine. We're taking an up and down motion and we're going to make it into a spinning motion. How we do that with the crankshaft. In front of it, we got a harmonic balancer. That harmonic balancer is key thing to keep the vibrations out. When we go through the process of moving those pistons, we're actually putting little explosions on top. We'll, like I said, we'll talk more about how that goes. But that explosion, it actually puts out a nice little vibration. And that vibration will shake really hard. So with this balancer, it actually helps, dampen some of it. That's why I call it a dampener or a harmonic balancer, just to keep out some of the harmonics. The other parts, and you can actually see the crankshaft down here in a full form of it right down here. We have an actual cylinder head, which is this other guy on the far right-hand side over here. This is cylinder head. That's kind of like sealing surface on top of the actually block itself, and this is what's going to be controlling the air and the fuel from coming in, and the inert gases, which is the burn gases, outside to the exhaust, down to the exhaust piping, through the muffler, and through the actual going through into the catalytic converter before it goes on the way out. We'll talk more about catalytic converters as the semester comes along too. All right, let's see if I can get my cursor back alive here. And here's a cylinder head, and kind of laid it out. This is what's going to cap on top. So this section up here is going to lay on top of the cylinders. You'll notice it almost looks like a circular part right here. Well, this guy right here is what seals the top of that cylinder. These valves are going to be moving. This is a sealing right here. It's going to allow either air or exhaust to travel in or out. And this is actually the valves out of it. Now, this one actually has a 4 valve per cylinder. Sometimes you'll have 2, sometimes you'll have 3. There is a combination that actually has 5 valves per cylinder. All it is about is breathing. How can we get the air and fuel in and out of that cylinder as quickly as possible? So we open up bigger gaps is what we do. This guy is key with the cooling system. We talk about the cooling system and the importance of this thermostat as we go along. So this is key when it comes to keeping the operating temperature of the engine at a certain cap. We don't want the operating temperature to go too high because then it starts causing meltdown of parts and components. And we don't want it too cold because that can affect our fuel economy and also our actual emissions that are put out through the tailpipe. If we get the temperature up to a certain temperature, we have next to the best optimal emissions and the best gas mileage we can. And this is the guy who kind of controls that, the temperature in the engine. This is the lubrication part of it. So this is where the oil filter is at. I'm taking a supply of oil from the oil pan and going up through my actual oil pump here. This guy right here is the oil pump. And I go through the filter and filter out all the contaminants that might be been left over afterwards, and then go up through my oiling passages to my different components that need to be oiled as we go along. So, that's part of the engine itself too. You'll notice these guys on the side, these are exhaust manifolds. That takes that inert gas I talked about out. The important part about this slide, and you're going to probably hear this repeated over and over and over and over in a lot of your different classes. Your engine performance class. You're going to be this is going to be repeated in your engines classes. This is the 4-stroke cycle. Now there are and there was 2-stroke lawnmowers, 2-stroke motorcycles, and unfortunately those were polluters, and EPA, ARB, Environment Protection Agency, and the Air Resources Board really frowned upon them, and they're pretty much outlawed, that you couldn't use them. You can buy them, let's put it that way. You could use them if you still had them, but there was some problems with them. So they kind of said, yeah, we don't want to have those anymore because we want to clean up the air. And there's a reason behind that. If I get time, I'll kind of discuss that with you also. But we have the 4-stroke cycle. So I'm back to my key point. So here is a 4-stroke cycle. This 4-stroke cycle is very important when we start talking about the different, how the energy is created. So what we're doing in a nutshell, we're taking chemical energy. That means that fuel and that air and the oxygen molecule, and we're going to actually cause this guy to do work for us. So we're going to take chemical energy and make it into mechanical energy, what we're doing. So what we're doing in the first stroke here is what they call the intake stroke. The intake stroke actually takes an air charge or an air and fuel charge in, and this depends on the style of the motor, but generally it's an air fuel charge that comes in. And this piston is going to be going down. So we're causing a vacuum or an absence of pressure. Now this absence of pressure will cause that flow, that air flow coming in. If we take, atmospheric and we take a cylinder and we pull air through, let's put it this way, we kind of pull that piston down, it's going to cause a vacuum, which is going to cause the imbalance, which is going to cause it to pull some air fuel charge in. After we get enough air fuel charge in, which we go to the bottom extreme of this piston stroke, so you're going to hear things like, oh my, I got a stroker motor or something like that. That means that the length of that rod travels. Okay. And there's a whole, video which I'll try to find for you about what's better, what is the difference between, the stroke or, torque and actually power. So there, I'll try to find that video for you. It's quite interesting because there's a big fight over what's better, more power, more of a stroke, or a torque to it. And diesel engines have a lot of torque to them, and we overcome certain things with gearing because we don't have a lot of torque, but we have a lot of power. Anyways, getting back to what we were talking about, I kind of digressed a little bit there. The intake stroke here is, again, the intake valve's open, piston's going down, causes a air-fuel charge to come in. Then we close that valve off. And that intake valve is closed, the exhaust valve is closed. So we have an intake valve and an exhaust valve over here. Now we close both of them and keep them closed. And then we're going to take and move that piston upward. When we go and move that piston upward, we're actually squeezing that air fuel charge together. If I take, just say I take a little bit of gas or something like that, the vapor goes up, and I light a match, you're going to probably see a little bit of a spark going up there, but not a big change. And it really depends on how much fuel. Okay, so if I take a molecule fuel and I have 1,000 molecules of air out there or oxygen out there, chances of all kind of burning is going to be very slight. So way I can overcome that is if I squeeze the stuff together. So if I squeeze air molecules together with the fuel molecules, I bring them closer together. So when I decide to light that off, so we're going to take a device called a spark plug. In spark ignition, we're going to actually use a spark plug to create the heat. Because remember, in how to create fire, we learned this back in high school, is we have that pyramid, that little thing that says, I need to have some kind of fuel, I need air, and I need heat. And that will cause fire to happen. And unfortunately, right now in California, we have too many fires going on right now. And, definitely want to, put out a great appreciation. And, they are our heroes. These firefighters right now are really doing a great job, just like our medical with the COVID thing. I really want to, really show a lot of appreciation for all the people that emergency responders and all that do for us. But back to where I was again. So you need to have that happen. So what I can do is I squeeze this stuff together. So you'll hear things like compression ratios. The higher the compression ratio, our general compression ratio on some of our motors are 8.5 to 1. It's pretty nice, but some of them can get up to like 14 to 1. That means it squeezes it a lot tighter. The one thing we have problems with when we squeeze too tightly is that we end up having that air getting very warm. Okay, when that air gets very warm, that fuel, that gasoline, and even some of your alternate fuels will actually start to self-ignite, and we don't want to. We want a controlled burn. So we're going to bring it up to almost its optimum before that kind of happens. And then when we get close to the top, we're going to actually turn on that spark plug, which is going to cross that spark or that heat element, and then it's going to go kaboom. And when it does that, we get into what we call the power stroke. This power stroke is going to slam down that piston. Okay, that's where that vibration actually happens too. And that's where we start getting our power. That's where that turns the crankshaft. And then we go into our last stroke, which is going to be the exhaust stroke. After we've burned the air fuel charge, and there really is no fuel charge left to support combustion, which we call inert gas, it will be pushed out of the exhaust valve. So we open up the exhaust valve and our inert gas comes out, which is our exhaust, which is going to go through some piping, going to go through some mufflers to keep the noise down, and it's also going to go through the catalytic converter to actually condition the exhaust to put as least amount of emissions or bad gases out the tailpipe as possible. All right, so here's a neat little cutaway kind of showing you all the parts together here. Here we have the actual, right here, the piston we talked about, crankshaft's right down inside here, and you'll notice the crankshaft, the connecting rod right here. This is what's going to connect the piston to the crankshaft, and it's going to allow it to spin the crankshaft as we do those controlled explosions. And then we actually have on this side our intake stroke. It's in the blue here. This is our intake. We'll talk more about that in the class as we go along. And then we have our exhaust side over here, which is going to go through the exhaust piping and all that as we go through. Our spark plug would be, you don't really see it very well down here, but there is a coil, a spark plug is right under the ignition coil. The coils actually gets enough energy. We'll be talking about that as we go on in the semester. And then we have our, this particular model is an overhead cam motor. So we have the camshaft on top. There are also what they call, pushrod motors, which actually have the camshaft down inside the actual engine itself. And then there's also, if you really want to go back real far and you want to make really good friends with Art, the tool guy in the tool room, you just start talking to him about flatheads and he'll talk your ear off for hours on that. Different configurations for the engines. This is a most common, let's put it that way. There's some other versions of this, but we do have what we call our inline 4s right here. There is an inline 3 too. So don't think that's it, because some of the really economy model cars actually had 3 cylinders. They vibrated a lot, but they got really good gas mileage. And then we have here our common one. It's very common in a lot of different models out there to have an inline 4. Now this inline 4, actually, if you look at it and we want to kind of number them across, this would be in the front. Okay, so we have 1 cylinder, 2 cylinders, 3 cylinders, 4 cylinders. So if we're looking at our numbering, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. Here is a 5-cylinder, which is another common type of arrangement. And this is an inline 4. And then we have our actual 6-cylinder inline 6s. And then we go into our V models. Our V models, have that V configuration. This V could be very important for performance. And they can change this V, not at just a 45, but we can change it different degrees as we go along too. And then we have a V6 and the V8, which is the most common. There's other models out there. There's some V16s and stuff like that, but then we get into different types of operations and stuff like that. The other type is the horizontal. A lot of times they call them boxer motors, Subaru being one of them. Before Subaru was really big into this kind of it, there was, VW had a kind of horizontal type one, also a 4-cylinder, and then Corvair, which was one of the Chevrolet or GM products, that actually had a horizontal 6-cylinder. I actually had one myself, but I had mine in a dune buggy. It was a lot of fun like that. So this is a different configuration. Doesn't mean it's that way. There's some different models and different styles that are coming out, and there's different types of setups out there also. So these are pretty much what we call the most common ones out there. And we're trying to, okay. And this comes down to what kind of arrangement. So this one, what you're seeing right now, is kind of a rear wheel drive. This one actually has the power going to the rear wheels. So we create the energy right up here in the engine itself, and then we go through the transmission. This will be in the transmission. We'll talk more of that once the class goes on. This has a drive shaft. It actually transfers from the front to the back. And then we have a differential, which actually changes this rotation this way. Now we're going to change it to the wheels this way, like that. So we've kind of changed things in a direction of where it's going. We do have other arrangements, which really, this is probably one of the most popular ones. We have the transaxle type systems where everything's up front. We got the engine up front, and it's not going straight back. Not saying all of them are this way, but it has the engine actually going sideways into the body, and then we have the transaxle attached to it, which it takes the differential and the transmission together, and it puts it out through the wheels through little shafts coming here, what we call half shafts. Or we have another style, which some of the models have on this, and then we have we're actually straight up back and forth engine. If you were at the front up here, it would actually, you would look straight down. It'd have all 4 cylinders lined up on it, and then the transaxles actually attached a different way. And then, like I said before, there's models that are called pushrod models. Reason they actually call them pushrod models, because this is one thing they had. There's an overhead valve, but it did not have the cams up on the top here. The cams were not on top. They were actually on down inside the body of the actual engine down here. So you can't really see it very well, but down and below these guys, which are called lifters. These guys are lifters. And then we have an actual push rod that transfers the actual movement to open and close these valves this way. So these have rocker arms. All right. So the other part, like I said earlier, was overhead valve and overhead cam. So these are overhead cam models. This is a single overhead cam. So we have a camshaft right here, and then we got a couple of rocker arms that push down directly onto the actual valves, depending on which one we want to open up. And then underneath it has a dual overhead cam. So we can use one camshaft to actually open and close the exhaust valves, and one camshaft to open and close the intake valves. And this is kind of a picture of dual overhead cams. So you see a camshaft here and a camshaft here. And then we have the valves, and we actually have the the actual, right over here, we actually have camshaft, and we have the followers that actually activate, or it's kind of like little mini rocker arms that actually go across and open up and close the valves. For performance-wise, the overhead cam much better, because response time's a lot less, whereas the pushrod motors are going to actually take a little bit of action to make that work. The other weak point of a pushrod motor is that pushrod, if you get a lot of RPM on it, it can actually bend that axle, or if other things can happen too, but that's just pretty much two of the most common things that happen. Then we have the old, what they call the actual, we call them Winkle motors or rotary motors, and these are taking away from the pistons going up and down. They actually took a rotor inside of a cylinders, and they caused the same 4-stroke cycle, but a little bit different the way they did it. So instead of having a piston, we actually had this rotor, kind of 3-sided rotor here, and it actually took the air intake right here, okay, and then it would rotate around, and as it rotated, it went into the compression stroke, and as it went down a little bit farther, it would actually go to the power stroke. So we would actually come and squeeze, you know, really tight, and then we'd fire off one spark plug and another spark plug, and then it would spin. You know, some only had one spark plug, but some had two. We had a trailing and a leading spark plug, and it would cause it to cause that expansion of gases, which caused that, you know, to push that actual rotor, and then it went into the power stroke, and then we come to the very end where we actually take and put the exhaust out. So instead of going up and down, it was just a total rotating motion. And they did have a different sound than the actual piston-driven type motors themselves. Yeah, really great at racetracks. I do want to admit to that. They were my boss that I had at USC, Tom Kenna. He would race these, and every once in a while he'd overheat one and say, "Hey, Marty, you want to come over to my house and work on my rotary?" And I said, "Unless you want to put a motor in, I don't want to do it." They were really hard. They were really, it could be really problematic when you're trying to rebuild them. This is just showing the rotation of the engine. You know, on the backside, you know, if you look from the engine from the backside, which is right over here, this end right here, that is where the flywheel, and we'll talk more about this when we get into our transmissions. This is where the flywheel spins, so it's counterclockwise. If you go up to the front, it's going to be clockwise. Okay, so you know, looking directly at it, you're going to see it rotate this way. When you're looking at the back, you're going to see it rotate the opposite. And then I talked a little bit about, you know, stroke, and this is kind of putting it down in a nutshell. Here we have the crankshaft here, and that crankshaft is actually, you know, down below. So we're talking crankshaft down here. This is the connecting rod. Here's the piston. So as we go up and we start squeezing, that's where we get that 10 to 1, you know, 8 to 1, and 8.5 to 1, or maybe we go down as far as, you know, 14 to 1. This is really key on it. Just a few pictures of a crankshaft, what it looks like with the connecting rods disconnected. Now this is actually showing the surface that it connects to. Now this is where the oil comes up to actually lubricate, and then we have the connecting rods connected to here as we go along. Now, one of the things I didn't mention it, but on the connecting rods, there's actually little inserts. These inserts are wearing points that when, you know, the after a period of time, it'll actually wear a little bit. And this is one of the things that we can actually replace. They're called bearings. We have a bearing surface here. You can actually see just a little bit down inside here where that bearing is at. There's an upper part of the bearing too, but the connecting rod will have similar right here. And that oil gets pumped around on it. And with that oil, we have a nice little film around it. It causes it to have that slip, and it actually, that oil can take away some of the heat as long as it goes too. If we run out of oil, that kind of wears everything and causes damage. This is kind of going into more specifications I use in a lot of my engines classes, so I'm going to kind of skip over this and stop this right now. This is going to be the end of the gasoline engine. Look forward to the diesel one coming up shortly. I'm going to go ahead and post this as soon as Zoom allows me to post. So you'll get this under our little section in our weekly, and you should see a section down there saying Zoom. And I try to do it on the date that I record it. So today, you'll get it today as a 923, and it'll be over gasoline engines. I'll kind of name it on there also, of course. All right. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I appreciate if you use the inbox, not directly to my SAC email. I'm not saying you can't go to the SAC email. If you don't get a response through the inbox, which is very unlikely unless I'm out of town or something like that, or in a meeting, it might take me a little time to get to you. But please go through the inbox and get and notify me. Other than that, have a great day, and I will be talking to you soon. Take care, folks.